My name is Anant Jhingran, and today we are going to talk to you about all the investment that you and your partners and third parties have done around REST, and yet GraphQL is emerging. Is it possible for that investment, either by you or others, be leveraged into this new world of GraphQL? So, welcome everyone. Uh, as I said, my name is Anant Jhingran. I'm the CEO of this company, StepZen, and just as kind of a past background, I was a CTO for API management company called Apigee that later got acquired by Google. And a lot of our experiences around what APIs are and what APIs work came from that experience that some of us have had at Apigee. And then before Apigee, I was also the CTO of IBM's data business. And I learned a lot about how databases do stuff. And we are trying to bring some of the database principles to this world of APIs. So if you look at the history of APIs, if you all recall, some of you may have been around in the 90s, that the rage was SOAP. I don't even know what it stands for anymore, but it was really about describing the backend services and all the constructions around it, and it kind of peaked in popularity, I would say, around 2000. And then in late 90s and early 2000, Roy Fielding came out with something called representational state transfer. And that became kind of the standard for how APIs got built. And by my estimate, by estimates of others, there are at least 100,000 really good, high quality APIs that exist, and a countless more within enterprises that cannot even be counted. And if I at Apigee, I recall that around 2012 or 11 or 12, we had to explain to people, enterprises, what APIs were. And by the time 2014 or 15 came about, there were RFPs on API management. And therefore, this kind of real shift happened in early 2010s, and REST became kind of the acceptable standard, accepted and the best standard by which backend services expressed what they could do. And the front-end people would use, front-end people and partners would use that. Now, in kind of around 2018 or so, GraphQL started to emerge. This came out of Facebook, and it became kind of a new way in which front-end people wanted information. And obviously, it's still a baby compared to where REST is. But by my estimate, there are kind of about 1,000 plus really awesome GraphQL APIs that exist out there. Awesome to be measured in kind of relative thing. But GraphQL is actually taking off. It'll take some time for it to kind of catch up. But so you've got all of this investment in REST, and yet GraphQL is taking off. And the key question is, can your investment in REST be leveraged into this world of GraphQL? So just as a reminder for everybody on kind of the REST fundamentals, the REST fundamentals really is that the front-end people have got an API that they can work against. Those APIs have got tools such as the OpenAPI/Swagger, Postman, that you can actually try it, and then you can actually issue curl or all the other language embeddings, including, for example, JavaScript fetch and everything else, in order to really access the API. The API itself is nice and simple, though of course every API is different. But behind that API has been a lot of work by somebody who has gone in and written all the orchestration logic and others. So for example, if this API is displaying the status of undelivered orders for a logged in customer, then that API is probably fetching data from customer system, fetching data from order system, connecting to delivery system, handling error conditions, handling caches, because there's a lot of work that's gone in this. And the key question really is, can this work actually be leveraged? The API producer the people who actually build the APIs, they've had to kind of think through all of these questions. What data do everybody who might want to consume my API want? What options do I provide? What access control do I need? What error conditions do I handle? How do I manage performance, et cetera, et cetera? So there's a kind of a really large list of issues that people have had to solve, and they represent years of sunk investment. But from a consumer perspective, REST represents a very good thing, but with REST, you get what you want. And for some of us who have done kind of databases, in the world of databases, you can actually ask for what you want, and the database basically produces. So in REST, you are asking for something, and the backend is giving you what they think you might want, or 10 of your brothers and sisters might want. Whereas in the world of SQL, you actually ask for exactly what you want. And then in GraphQL has come about, and it actually kind of found a right nice balance in the middle. It draws a boundary around what you can ask, but within that boundary, you can actually ask anything. So that example that I gave with respect to a developer wanting the status of undelivered orders can be expressed like this in a GraphQL thing, that I know the name of the customer or the email of the customer, give me his or her orders, and give me the delivery status associated with those orders. And from a front-end developer perspective, the fact that this needs to go across 3 different systems or 5 different systems, or the data is represented in different ways, is all irrelevant. The front-end person is actually able to ask for and do this. So I have actually fallen in love with GraphQL, not just because people like you who are front-end consumers, but I believe GraphQL is the way in which new interfaces and APIs should be built. And if you look at what Twitter has done with respect to re-architecting its system, GraphQL becomes the way. So then the key question really becomes is that people have invested a lot in kind of this REST-based APIs, and yet the API consumers, people who want to use those APIs, are slowly migrating towards GraphQL. How do you actually uh, find the right balance? And what StepZen actually fundamentally believes in is that the way to do this is to build out a data consumption layer that exposes GraphQL on the front, and on the back, it connects with the REST APIs that have been built out, or in cases, database APIs have been built out, or NoSQL database have been built out. All of them can be brought together in this new GraphQL layer. And the GraphQL layer then offers abstraction. As you saw, the front end basically asks for what she wants, and it gets delivered. But it also offers consistency. REST is just, the word REST is REST, but every REST is different. But having this kind of layer in the middle offers consistency. And then, of course, you can kind of connect the dots. So we strongly believe that you should take your investments in REST and quickly assemble a GraphQL front end in front of it, and we'll kind of show you how to do that. Okay. Our point of view, this is where my kind of second half of or first half of my professional life comes, which dealt with databases, is that our view is that this particular GraphQL API against those various backends should be assembled as opposed to programmed. While you can program your way out of everything, if you actually assemble these bits, if you declaratively point to, these are my databases, these are my REST APIs, these are in some cases GraphQL APIs, then if you kind of assemble them, then the system can actually do a lot of interesting smart things. And that's what I've written in the kind of the middle box, where you should be able to normalize and stitch and handle protocols as opposed to programming your way out of it. You should be able to automatically deduce caching, parallelism, query rewrites, etc. What I call run well. So first is just make it work. Second is make it work well, and then make it work securely. So in kind of this declarative approach, the system, in this case, StepZen, can handle a lot of these things that I'm showing on the right. Whereas if you're going to do programmatic approach, then you've got to kind of write and assemble all of these bits and handle all of these conditions on the right-hand side. So we are strong believers in kind of declarative approach. And in particular, in this particular webinar, I'm going to focus on kind of how do you take your REST investments and convert them into GraphQL. But of course, as we said, you can actually bring in databases and other backends too. So in StepZen, the assembly, the declarative assembly, really happens in one of two ways. And I'm only focusing on REST for now. You can either take a consumer outside in view. What, as a consumer, as a front-end team, what would you like to see? You don't like to see database tables named gobbledygook. You like to see a customer object and an order object, etc. So you can take a consumer-centric view, and you can say, okay, now this consumer-centric view needs to be populated and hydrated with this backend. So that's kind of going from top to bottom. Or you can take a production-centric view, which says this is what the backend is exposing, and presumably people have done some really hard work in exposing the rights of the business objects. How can I take that backend view and then kind of combine it into my kind of GraphQL? And I'll show you both sides of it. And in the middle, of course, you'd want to kind of connect the dots because data is coming from different backends, and you need to be able to mix and match it. So in steps then, we allow you to kind of construct this GraphQL API by either taking consumer-centric view or a producer-centric view across REST, and I'm not going to show you database and GraphQL, and then connect the dots. But that's not enough to actually just build it. You have to also provide the secrets with respect to backends, and then that gets deployed, and I'll show you the deployment. And once it's deployed, all the stories about all the things that I talked about with respect to run well, and run securely actually all become completely valid. Okay, so if you are with me so far, and I can't actually see you, so I'm assuming that you all are. Let's go on and see this in kind of action. So what I'm going to do is walk you through a demo of how REST APIs can be GraphQLized, REST APIs can be mixed and matched, and then I'm going to actually first show you a finished endpoint, and then I'm going to show you how it is built. Okay, so we are going to take 5 different APIs. We're going to take an open weather map, which displays weather. We are going to take dev2, which I presume many of you use. We are going to use Airtable and show you how it can be GraphQLized using examples. Dev2 will get GraphQLized using the open API spec of Dev2. And then Google Places and Directions will be GraphQLized using examples. So we've got different tricks that I'm going to show you with respect to taking your REST investment and converting it into GraphQL. And then I'm going to show you how you can easily connect the dots across a couple of these APIs. In the endpoint that I create, each API will have a prefix that will make it easy for you to understand where it's coming from. And while APIs actually produce the data, APIs sometimes also consume the data and make changes. But today I'm not going to show you the post part of it, but that's all supported. Okay. So, and then after I've shown you kind of the endpoint, we'll then deploy a small subset of this endpoint. We'll create a small subset of this endpoint and show you the tools and tricks that are needed to take your REST and convert it into GraphQL, and then we'll deploy it and we'll show you some of the results from it. Hopefully the demo gods will shine on us. So let's first go and look at that finished endpoints with those kind of 5 APIs. Okay, so what I've done is I have used the StepZen CLI to actually deploy this called REST finished. So let's get there, and this is my endpoint, and let's go run this. For those of you who are familiar with GraphQL, it's absolutely awesome that there's a huge set of tooling available for you to actually issue queries against. For those of you who have used REST, know that the Swagger tooling or the Postman tooling is kind of hit and miss, or it's got its own variants and all that stuff. Whereas the tooling in GraphQL is extremely consistent, irrespective of what the backend is, and that's one of the things that I really love about it. So, for example, it also comes with its own kind of pre-built documentation. So, for example, here is something. If I kind of hover on this, you can see what this particular API is all about, and it is about list of published articles and everything else. So there's some fantastic things that you get out of GraphQL, including the tooling, and I'll show you how you'll actually construct this particular query out there. So let's first start with weather. So weather is, of course, built out of open weather map, as I said. Now, open weather map, I'll show you later on, so use a lot of information, but this is like a consumer in, and I'm only interested in just the temperature, the current temperature. So let's look at what the current temperature in Miami is. And the things in purple are field arguments that are required. And so I'm basically asking for, give me the weather, and all I'm getting is kind of the temperature associated with it. Okay. And this is in Fahrenheit, and it's about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. It's always hot in Miami. But this particular API in kind of GraphQL has gone against a REST endpoint in open weather map and fetch the data, and exactly only the data that you've constructed in order to do this. Okay, let's take a look at a different one. Let's take a look at Airtable, where in Airtable, it is not about the fixed data, it's not about the data that the producer produces, but it's about your data, right? That exists in Airtable. So let's kind of go and fetch this. Let's not do this. Let's do this, and let's do email equals on.do, at example.com. Okay, and let's get the list of records. Let's get what city is he in, what's his email address, and what's his name. Okay, and there's gone against Airtable and produce this piece of data. And the Airtable API is again a REST API, but look at how beautifully you can actually query it in GraphQL. You've got kind of a consistent way of doing this. We take care of all URL encoding and everything else, and you are basically picking and selecting whatever fields you want in an extremely intuitive way. And this, we do all the translations and conversions against the REST APIs. And Airtable, of course, has spent a lot of effort in creating the REST APIs. So we are not undoing that effort or redoing that effort. We are just leveraging that effort and bringing it to the world of GraphQL. Let's take a look at Dev2. I've just signed up for Dev2, whereas a colleague of ours, Brian Rinaldi, is a regular user of Dev2. Again, it's very consistent. You just give a set of parameters, and the parameters are in purple. And in this case, I don't know why his user ID is remote synth. And let's look at one article that he has written, and let's go submit that. And there it goes. And now it has gone against the Dev2's APIs and produce the right answer. Now, what you'll find is that if you really look at it, you'll see that there are lots and lots of Dev2s where there's only one Airtable and there's only one open weather map. And that is because Dev2 was GraphQLized using the Open API specification. So Dev2 has produced a good Open API specification that says, here are all the endpoints. And we have tooling that goes in and schleps that and creates the right structures with respect to GraphQL. So you can actually start to work in this new world across the entire gamut of APIs that exist out there, and from Dev2, and basically work in a consistent way across Dev2 and everything else using your GraphQL constructs. Because we go in, we examine the Open API and we convert them into GraphQL world. Now let me just show you one last bit here, and Google. This is Google Places thing. For those of you who have Google accounts, Google has got some fantastic sets of capabilities. I've got kind of a. I'm not going to show you the key that we use for Google for obvious reasons, but let's do a query. I love burritos, and let's find some places in not Francisco, but Francisco, and let's see what the results are. And let's go and look at some of the places and some of the restaurants and their formatted address. Okay, and let's do this. There is just a okay, and all I'm doing is I'm taking a key, passing it as a parameter, and the key is there actually in the field down below called query variables. But if I pop that up, then I'll be leaking my key to you guys, right? And I'm just saying is use that key and make a query to a REST backend in the end. And let's go run this file. Okay, and here they are. Here are all the restaurants in San Francisco, or the top 10 restaurants in San Francisco that satisfy that condition called this. So look at the beauty of this. With StepZen, all the REST APIs that you're dealing with are now suddenly available as GraphQL, and you can actually query them and make that work. Okay, that's not all. Let me show you some more magic. So we've got Airtable data, and if you recall, in Airtable data, customer was living in some city, and of course we can pick weather from that city. So is it possible for us? One of the beauty about GraphQL, the word graph comes from GraphQL because dots can get connected here. So can we actually connect the dots between Airtable data and weather data? Okay, so let's try and do that. So let's take a look at it, and the code, and I'm going to show you the code separately, but the code that actually ran this was as simple as Airtable has got a set of fields, and those fields get executed by this particular query. I'm actually going to build this for you and show this to you, but this is the backend query that gets executed against this. And you see something which I have kind of commented out. Let me kind of comment that backend. And what that says is that let me attach into the customer a new field called weather. This is not coming from Airtable. This is a new field called weather. And the way to kind of bring in weather is to basically issue the query that you saw in Open Weather Map. And we do all the smart things of massaging of fields. We say, okay, Open Weather Map may require city, and city is available, and therefore you can pass it, but we can do other transformations and other things. So now let's go save this change, okay? And look at our tool. Automatically will end up redeploying it, okay? And once it's redeployed, let me rerun it. Okay, and now, as you can see, you're seeing a bit of my API. And now let's see, look what has happened. So if now look at it, there is a weather available in the context of customer. So let's do the same customer. Okay, in this case, if you recall, it was email equals john.doe@example.com. Okay, and let's again pick up his city, pick up his email, pick up his name, but also in this case, pick up the weather. And hopefully, if all things work well, the temperature has gone down a bit. Wow, by about 0.87 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's absolutely awesome. But you saw the beauty about GraphQL, and you saw the beauty of StepZen. We were able to kind of bring in weather, and we were able to bring in Airtable data, all using REST backends and connecting them via GraphQL. And then we are able to connect the dots across the two. Okay. And I don't have time to show this, but it's very, very easy for us to then, for example, also connect the dots between Google Places and Google Directions. So not only can you list all the restaurants, but you can actually list the directions or the time taken, and you can then decide on what place you really want to go to based on, or what place you want to display to the end user based on not just the rating of that restaurant, but also the time it takes to travel. And that's again an example of linking two different APIs together. And it's really, really straightforward for us to do within the context of StepZen by just attaching the query on one side into this. Okay, so you saw this. What I did was I brought in so many different backends. I brought in Airtable, I brought in Open Weather Map, I brought in lots of Dev2 APIs, and we brought in something from Google, and all of these things kind of get GraphQLized, get queried in a consistent way, and they can be mixed and matched in by connecting the dots. Okay, and that's the beauty of it. And now let's kind of just go and build this out. So I'm going to build some subset of this out with respect to what you saw, but hopefully all of you appreciate the magic of GraphQL and the abilities of StepZen to kind of abstract, rest away, and connect the dots. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually kill this and go to a different directory, rest build. And what I'm going to do is, if you look at my rest build directory, I'm going to try to build Airtable that you saw, and I'm going to try to build Dev2, and I'm going to try to build Open Weather Map. Okay, so let's first start with Open Weather Map. Okay, so in Open Weather Map, as I told you, we want to take kind of a consumer view down. Okay, so Open Weather Maps gives a lot of information back from the REST response. But all you want to do is to extract the field called temp. Okay, and so what we have to do is to say that, look, I don't care about anything else. Just give me the field temp. And by the way, this temp in my GraphQL view maps to this temp there. Now you can rename them, convert their types, do whatever you want. But I'm just going to show you something really, really simple here. Okay, so if you do that, so let's go look at what I did for Open Weather Map. And all I did was I said there's a field called temp, which is of type float. Float is a type that is understood by GraphQL. And I said that get it from this particular endpoint. You can change, for example, from units to from imperial to metric if you want answer in this, and take the query called city and pass it as a field parameter of query. Okay, and this OWM configuration is where we kind of store the secrets separately. I'm not going to show it to you, but you can see config.yaml. That's where you kind of store this, and in steps then you kind of take those GraphQL snippets and the config and kind of deploy it. So this was as simple as, because the temp data was going to come from a field called main.temp. We are saying that go into the structure called main. You can go into any parts of structure, but this is just a convenience. We say go to structure called main and extract temp from it. So it's as simple as taking what your view is from the top and saying, okay, how do I hydrate that view with different snippets of backend? But as I pointed out, there's other ways of doing it. So for example, with Airtable and similarly with Google, we want to do the reverse. We want to kind of look at the back end and say, what is the GraphQL that we can actually generate out of it? Okay. And so for us, it's very simple. We don't yet have this tooling out in public, but I'm going to give you kind of a preview of this, and this will be out in a few weeks. And some of you who want early access to it, please reach out to me. But the idea really is that the backend is spewing this kind of JSON, and what you want to do is be able to convert it into this kind of GraphQL, and so that you can then query it in kind of GraphQL world. So I'm going to just run this tool, which I told you is not yet out in public, but it is. What it does is it takes a template file. The template file has got keys and everything else, which again I'm not going to show you. And it's a very simple construct which says when you issue this particular curl command, how do you extract the various fields? What fields become query parameters? What field become that? So that how you can basically build GraphQL out of this. So let's kind of run this. Watch Airtable. Airtable right now doesn't have any GraphQL code in it, but let's run this tool. And then when I run this tool, it should have it's thinking and it's run. And now I've got kind of the GraphQL. So we have gone and introspected the backend and generated a GraphQL out of it. And I'm going to actually do all of them, and then I'm going to kind of run this by this. And we have got kind of an capability of kind of doing optional parameters and others that is not yet captured in the tool. So that's why I had to go in and edit this a bit. Okay, and the third thing that we're going to do is that, so with Airtable, I gave a specific curl call and said, go fetch the data and convert it into GraphQL. But with Dev2, we are lucky that Dev2 has its own open API spec. Okay, so if you look at Dev2's open API spec, it says, here is all the things that I can do, and here are the parameters that I take, and here is what we do. So wouldn't it be great if we could just go schlep that in and convert it into kind of GraphQL endpoints? And so that's exactly what we'll do. This is a different tool, and I'm going to run this tool. Okay, I'm going to one second. So let me just run this tool. Open API to one second. Sorry guys. Okay, so let's run this tool, and you see what it has done. It has generated a GraphQL. It has gone and examined the YAML file and has generated a GraphQL. Okay, and there you are. It's got those various things that you saw. And there I enabled them dev. I forgot to give the label here, so they're all labeled as get. But all the same things that you saw are now available. And in fact, because it was using their YAML tool, all the comments in their open API spec get absorbed. And that's why you saw when I hovered over it, you did this. So now let's take all of these and deploy them. Okay, so let's take Airtable. Let's take, so as I told you, there's one index file that contains my what I would call the manifest for everything that I have. So I'm going to deploy this, I'm going to deploy this, and I'm going to deploy Airtable. I've already deployed. Open weather map / OWM dot GraphQL. Okay, so in addition to all the GraphQL snippets that exist, Airtable, dev2, open with a map, there's an index file that contains, says pull, and there's a config file that I'll not show. Those are basically the three things that kind of come together as a bundle and gets deployed on StepZen. So let's do this, and let's do a StepZen start to deploy this particular thing. And hopefully, if I've done everything right, this will get deployed as a new endpoint called REST build. And this endpoint is available on StepZen. And let's go there. And you'll see that this endpoint is now available on something called REST build. And all the things that I talked about are all available right now. So for example, I can do the same thing and do Miami and do the temp. And there it is. That's the temperature. And let me do something for Airtable also. And email equals and let's get just created that, and let's get the name of the, okay, and there it is. You've got this thing now working, and all I did was I used three different techniques for Airtable. I used this, and then for dev2 I used the Open API spec. Okay, so the three techniques that I showed you was you can construct something from consumer down, or you can basically give us a curl call and we generate a GraphQL out of it, or you can give us an Open API spec and we generate GraphQL out of it. Okay, and with that and kind of hand constructing or constructing everything else, all of your REST investment is now available in GraphQL. So hopefully you guys liked what you saw, and I've got a couple of other things, and then we'll open it up for questions. Questions can be asked on, there's a questions tab or a comments tab. Please ask the questions and I'll try to answer almost all of them. So what you saw again was easy creation of GraphQL from REST. You saw an endpoint. You saw open weather map where you only pick certain sets of fields. And then we also had a way of taking backends and converting into GraphQL. With dev2, it was using Open API tool. With Airtable, it was using curl examples. And with Google Place in the directions, it was also using curl examples. And we also showed you in the case of Airtable and open weather map, I showed you how you can connect the dots and you can do the same thing across everything else. Okay, so that's what you saw. Okay, so just to kind of finish the talk, we took 5 REST endpoints and GraphQLized them. So all your REST investment is available. There's some tooling. You can actually do all of this on your own, but there's some tooling like JSON to SDL, curl to SDL, and this Open API tool, which will be releasing soon. Sometimes you want to start with consumer view down. Sometimes you want to start with producer view up. Okay. We also showed you how it is easy to connect the dots, but the central thesis is that you kind of quickly assemble your GraphQL endpoint, you give it to us, and it's always on. It handles secrets, it does query parallelism, it does caching. You saw how responsive everything was. We try to just make really, we're a bunch of people who have done database and backend optimizations that we can do all the scaling and scale outs and everything else for you. Okay. So the central thesis is leverage your and third parties' decades of investments. Airtable is not your investment, for example. Dev2 is not your investment, but you may have your own backends where people have actually gone and built out REST interfaces. You can actually combine all of them and you can bring them to the GraphQL world. You get kind of a common abstraction layer, common way of querying across all of them. You get a consistent way of doing it, and you can connect the dots. And we can make all of that happen with kind of simple command lines, code, and clicks. So you don't write code, you're basically assembling your GraphQL endpoints from a set of building blocks. So if you like what you saw, please sign up on stepzen.com. There's a blog on this talk that will be coming soon. You can go and check out our other blogs on stepzen.com/blog. And then if any of you are interested, we've been doing a few of these. If any of you are interested in having a deeper dive with about GraphQL and REST investments and other backends within your organizations, we'll be extremely happy to do that with all of you. Okay, so with that, I'm going to stop and take questions. So Helen, the only trick is that I want to make sure that I'm not, I stop my screen so that it doesn't end up. Okay, awesome. Yeah, what are some examples of scenarios where you take a consumer view as a versus a producer view, and how does Stepson help in both of these scenarios? Oh, that's an absolutely awesome question. So in effect, there are kind of two competing or cooperating perspectives. The backend folks are always focused on how to make things optimal and performant, and the front end teams are always focused on how to make things consumable. Okay, and neither of those approaches is wrong, but neither of those approaches is entirely correct. And so you have to kind of bring both of those worlds together. And our view in StepZen is very clear that you should be able to meet in the middle. And irrespective of whether you start from the top or start from the bottom, okay, you start from the consumer view or producer view, you should be able to produce something that both sides are really, really happy about. And that's just kind of very consistent philosophy. And that's why our tools and tooling supports meet in the middle from either side. Okay. Other questions? Okay. Awesome. Again, thank you very much, all of you. Hopefully, you guys and gals got a great sense of how REST is fundamentally important, but can be easily leveraged into this new world of GraphQL, and how this new world of GraphQL allows you, with StepZen's help, to actually abstract the backends, provide a consistent view, and connect the dots. And then because StepZen is running as a service, you have no infrastructure to run. Everything basically runs. So there's nothing else that you need to deploy between your backend REST or your third-party REST and your front-end browsers, which are actually consuming those APIs. Okay, so with that, thank you very much, and looking forward to having many of you sign up and continue to give us feedback on what are the features that we can build. Thank you.